Good afternoon. I have quite a few words for you today. 3 p.m. this afternoon, the Secretary General of these United Nations will speak at the closing of the 73rd General Assembly, which you've just heard from the PGA about. He will commend the work of the outgoing General Assembly President, calling her a champion for multilateralism and making the United Nations relevant for all. The Secretary General will point to the adoption of the General Assembly 73rd session of 2 global compacts, one on migration and one on refugees, as example of what can be achieved through international cooperation. His remarks have been shared with you under embargo. Turning to the Security Council, Martin Griffiths, the special envoy for Yemen, briefed the Council by VTC today from Geneva. He said, "We have no time to waste before moving forward with purpose and resolve towards the political solution to end the conflict in Yemen." In particular, he warned that the attack on Aramco facilities in Saudi Arabia over the weekend has consequences well beyond the region. At a minimum, he said, this kind of action carries the risks of dragging Yemen into a regional conflagration and makes the chances of a regional conflict that much higher. You will have seen that the Secretary General for himself condemned Saturday's attack on the Aramco oil facilities and called upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint, prevent any escalation amid heightened tensions, and comply at all times with international humanitarian law. Emergency Relief Coordinator Mark Lowcock also spoke to Council members and said, "We have seen numerous incidents since the last months in which innocent civilians have been killed and injured." He said there is a persistent pattern of attacks on Yemen which could kill and injure civilians and damage civilian infrastructure, and he once again urges accountability for violations. Mr. Lowcock added that the operating environment for aid agencies Mr. Lowcock added that the operating environment in which aid agencies has perhaps never been worse than it is now. Almost 90% of the incidents are due to bureaucratic blockages, he said, noting in particular the restrictions imposed by Ansar Allah. And on Saturday, Antonio Guterres visited some of the areas most impacted by Hurricane Dorian in Abaco and Grand Bahama Islands. The Secretary General was able to survey the damage by air and also walk through the area known as the Mud, a poor neighborhood where many Haitian migrants lived. He said he was horrified by the level of destruction. "I've never seen such a level of systematic devastation. Hurricane Dorian has been classified as Category 5. I think it is Category Hell," he said. He added that while we have always had many hurricanes, they are now more intense, more frequent, and more powered by climate change. He stressed that the international community should learn 2 things from this disaster. First, we need to stop climate change. Second, countries like the Bahamas do not contribute to climate change, but are already experiencing its impact, deserve full support to fully respond to the humanitarian emergency and also recover and build resilience. During his visit to the Bahamas, he met with Prime Minister Minnis and discussed the progress and relief efforts, and he said the UN remains committed to keep supporting the government going forward. He also visited an evacuation center where he listened to hurricane victims and later on from various international organizations that are helping to coordinate the recovery. The UN, turning to Syria, we remain gravely concerned over violations in northwest of Syria despite a ceasefire announced on August 30th. 9 people, including 2 women and 3 children, were reportedly killed in Idlib governorate since Friday. Several civilian facilities were also reportedly damaged due to airstrikes and shelling. The 2-week suspension of hostilities has given some respite to civilians who have suffered immensely under intense hostilities during the recent months, in which nearly 1,100 people have lost their lives and numerous populated areas were left in ruins, with entire towns largely erased. The UN reminds all parties to the conflict and those who have influence over them of their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure at all times. Turning to Lebanon, the pre-trial judge at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, Daniel Frenson, today lifted the confidentiality of his decision confirming the indictment against Salim Jamil Ayash relating to 3 attacks committed in 2004 and 2005. The confirmation of this indictment marks the opening of a new case before the Special Tribunal, An arrest warrant was issued against Mr. Ayash, who is charged, among other counts, with committed terrorist attacks and intentional homicide and attempted homicide. The indictment and arrest warrant were transmitted to the Lebanese authorities. They have the obligation to search for, arrest, and transfer the accused to the Special Tribunal's custody. Turning to a couple of African files. First, on the Central African Republic. This weekend, there were new clashes in the town of Birao in the Central African Republic. The UN peacekeeping mission reports that 38 combatants from 2 armed groups died and others were injured. There were reportedly no civilian casualties. Today, the situation remains calm, but tensions persist in the city. The mission continues to patrol the streets in and around the town to protect civilians. Over the weekend, the UN force commander, General Bala Keita, met with the mayor of Birao to assess security measures and developments. The mission also continues to engage at the political level with regional groups and Central African governments to find a durable solution. As a reminder, violence in the town has forced over 13,000 people to flee their homes since the beginning of the month. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our UN peacekeeping colleagues said today they are reinforcing their capacity to protect civilians following a new wave of violence in South Kivu province. In the past few days, villages in the Minembwe region have been attacked by militias, resulting in the loss of life and population displacement. The peacekeeping mission has deployed attack helicopters to support the National Armed Forces. They've also intensified patrols and set up temporary base in the region. According to the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, this new wave of violence has directly impacted 34,000 displaced people. In addition, hundreds of people have been gathered near the UN bases in the area to receive assistance and protection. The Secretary General's Special Representative and head of the peacekeeping mission, Leila Zerougi, has called upon all parties to the conflict to put an end to the violence. And nearly 1 million people, including 160,000 children under 5 in northern Mozambique, are facing food shortages and nutrition crisis. According to UNICEF, conditions are expected to worsen over the coming month. The dire situation is a direct result of the devastation wrought by cyclones Idai and Kenneth, which struck earlier this year. UNICEF stressed the number of children under 5 are facing crisis levels of food insecurity and is expected to rise to 200,000 in storm-affected areas by February of next year. Around 38,000 children could become severely malnourished and at risk of death in the same period. And today, the UN Migration Network reiterated its call to end the detention of children for immigration purposes in every region of the country. They said detaining children in this context, whether they are traveling alone or with their families, have been recognized as a child rights violation. They added that studies have consistently shown that detention and family separation are traumatic experiences that have profound impact on children's health and long-term development. And wanted to flag a hockey game for you because it's not hot enough. The New York Islanders are participating with the UN Environment Program to host a segment of The Last Game, a series of hockey games designed to raise awareness on the impact of climate change. The game will take place tomorrow at 3 p.m. prior to the Islanders' preseason game against the Philadelphia Flyers. I assume that's in Brooklyn. The Secretary General and His Holiness the Pope are the honorary captains of The Last Game. They will not be on the ice, in case there was a question. They are the honorary captains of The Last Game, which is a series of hockey games that will take place in and over 30 countries are threatened by climate change. The game will be followed by a meet and greet with various distinguished guests, as well as educational session where guests can speak to scientists, local citizens, national leaders to discuss the challenges of climate change. Also, having to do with the climate, today is the International Day for the Preservation of the Ozone Layer. The theme celebrates more than 3 decades of international cooperation to protect the ozone layer and climate under the Montreal Protocol. In his message, the Secretary General said, as we prepare for Climate Action Summit next week, we should remember that the Montreal Protocol is both an inspirational example of how humanity is capable of cooperating to address a global challenge and a key instrument to tackling today's climate crisis. a healthy ozone layer, and climate are essential to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, he said. A couple of things I want to flag to you. First, as soon as we're done here, Lise Kingo, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, will brief you on the 2019 Global Compact Progress Report and the forthcoming Global Compact Leaders Week. Then at 1 p.m., Ambassador Mbenzia will be here to brief you on Syria. Tomorrow, the Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, will be joined by Luis Alfonso de Alba, the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Climate Action, to brief you on all the high-level meetings that are taking place next week. Mr. de Alba will focus on Climate Action Summit, while Ms. Mohammed will talk not just about climate, but also on the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, the high-level meeting on universal health care, the high-level dialogue on financing for development, and the Small Island Developing States meeting. And as a reminder, the Secretary General himself will also brief you on Wednesday in this very room at noon. Unless there is breaking news tomorrow, we will let Ms. Mohammed speak and not have a noon briefing. Lastly, a correction and apology I need to issue. We were made aware over the weekend that the UN Gift Management website incorrectly attributed the historical atrocities at Guernica, depicted in the Tapestry by Pablo Picasso, which you've all seen, incorrectly attributed the historical atrocities to the Republic of Spain. We know full well that the Republicans were the victims and not the perpetrators. As a result, the website has been placed under maintenance in order to make the necessary correction. And to enable full review of the website's content, we regret the error and extend our apologies to the people and government of Spain. Mr. Bays.
With regard to further on the statement that you issued over the weekend on the attacks on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, can you tell me since then what the Secretary-General has been doing, who has he been speaking to, what diplomacy has he himself been engaging in?
There have been contacts I've had at various levels over the weekend, and they will continue during the week and obviously during the General Assembly week. Okay. Let Edie go first.
Does the Secretary General have any response to President Trump's tweet that the U.S. is locked and ready to respond once those responsible for the attacks are identified, verified?
I think I would refer you back to what the Secretary General said and his call to all the parties involved to exercise maximum restraint. Yeah.
Again, follow up on what James and Edith have asked. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that Iran is responsible for the attack that took place on Saudi Aramco. Does the Secretary General started any sort of connections or communication with the Iranian government to try to verify these accusations?
We have no mandate nor any forensic capacity to establish who may have been responsible. Monsieur. The microphone, please. I can hear you, but the millions of people watching also want to hear you. Yeah. It'll work. Press the button. There we go.
Sorry for that. Today, if I'm not miscorrected, was the last day for the Secretary General to report back on the investigation regarding the death of Dag Hammarskjöld. Is there a chance that we will have this report before the end of the day? And when do you think, otherwise, the Secretary General will fulfill the request made by the General Assembly?
The requests have been fulfilled. The report is in the proverbial pipeline in terms of translations and editing. We expect it to emerge, hopefully, out of this pipeline sooner rather than later. But it was filed on time. But as this is a period of a huge number of reports having to go to the General Assembly, so whatever delay is just due to the overwhelming number of reports rather than to any statement. Apostolis.
Stephane, on Thursday, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu told CNN Turk that they are making preparations to reopen Famagusta, the fenced area of Varosha. A couple of days earlier than that, Çavuşoğlu visited the fenced area and he announced plans to open a Turkish consulate. Both actions violate Security Council resolutions 550 for Varosha and 541 for non-recognition, calling null and void the creation of a state there. So last Tuesday, you made a statement on behalf of the Secretary General expressing concern on plans by Netanyahu to annex West Jordan Valley, whatever. Is the Secretary General having a reaction on this violation of Security Council resolutions?
Sure. I will let the compare and contrast of different files to you. We will take each issue separately. The issue that you mentioned on regarding Cyprus is obviously important and sensitive in the context of Cyprus. We're monitoring the situation closely and continuously. The UN is and will continue to be guided by relevant Security Council resolutions. The UN has not received any formal information on plans to open Varosha. And as you mentioned, we also recall that Resolution 1550 states, and I quote, that it considers that attempts to settle any part of Varosha by people other than its inhabitants as inadmissible. Any UN involvement in the planning and implementation of potential measures related to Varosha would be guided by the relevant Security Council resolutions.
A clarification. You mean you have not been informed by the government of Turkey? This is what you mean?
We have not received any formal information on these plans.
By the government of Turkey?
By whomever, we have not received any formal information. Madam, and then Monsieur.
Stephane, on Idlib, three things. Could you please tell us what is the update on humanitarian situation there, and also how many people you have exactly on the ground, or approximately, and also according to the observation of your team on the ground, how do you could you elaborate on the operations that's going on by the Syrian and Russian?
Well, I mean, on Idlib, I think I addressed that in the beginning. Is that we're concerned at the ongoing fighting. There was a ceasefire announced on 30th August. It seems to have been repeated violations. Civilians were killed over the weekend. The ongoing fighting makes it all that much more challenging for anyone, whether it's the UN or its partners or anyone, to get to the civilians that are in need of humanitarian help. So our immediate concern is to see a halt to the fighting. As for the exact numbers, I will try to get you something.
And do you attribute the violation of the ceasefire to a specific party there in Idlib, or?
We're not in charge of monitoring the ceasefire, but what we do know is that the civilians are incurring the wrath of the fact that the ceasefire still is not being respected. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Yesterday in Tunisia, there was free, fair, transparent, non-violent, organized, civilized elections. Normally, the SG issues statement in these cases. Was there any statement? Was there any?
No, there's no statement as of yet. We're obviously waiting for the preliminary results to be officialized. We hope to say a bit more, but we obviously salute the people of Tunisia and the government of Tunisia for holding these elections in what appears to be a very peaceful and normal atmosphere, as one would say. Sir.
Thank you, Stephane. Before I put the question, let me say that I hope UN bodies also associate with cricket as much as with hockey. So my question...
I'll tell you, I promise, if you get me to understand cricket, I will speak about cricket. How about that?
My question is, do you have any comments on the arrest today of a senior-most Indian Kashmir leader, Sheikh Abdullah, He's 81 years old. He's member of Indian Parliament, supposed to be pro-India, and he was arrested today, and along with so many others, and the curfew and the lockdown continues. Any comments?
Look, we have continued to express our concern at the situation in Kashmir, and hope, given that the only solution would be a political one, and also that any solution needs to be addressed with the full inclusion of human rights. I have no. I mean, I've responded to the best of my ability to that question. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. You talked about the food security situation in Mozambique following Cyclone Idai in your briefing, but also Zimbabwe was the second country after Mozambique to be greatly affected by Cyclone Idai. Do you have any numbers on the food
I don't have any off the top
situation?
of my head, but we can try to get some for you. We will do that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stephane. On weekends attacks in Saudi energy supply, you've been talking about the conflict, the larger repercussions that will take, but the attack also took out almost 5% of global energy supply, of oil supply. How threatening you think is that for the global energy stability and security?
Look, obviously, it's of concern for the security of the region. I'm really not in a position to talk about the oil markets. I think others have. I just don't have the information on the oil markets that I could make any serious or smart comment on. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Carla Bridgedal from the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday. I'm one of the DAG fellows. Given the Secretary General's experience in the Bahamas and him saying that, it was Hurricane Hell, has he given any sort of indication on how the UN will engage and help small island developing states like the Bahamas to have a greater voice in climate change resolutions and policies?
Well, I mean, I think this is one of the things that the Secretary General has been pushing, is ensuring that those, in a sense, who have done the least to contribute to climate change are helped through, and suffer the most, are helped through resilience packages, through adaptation packages. There is a meeting, if I'm not mistaken, the Samoa Pathway, which the Secretary General will strongly support. So this is one of the messages that he has been given to all member states. Mario.
Thank you. On the issue of the Guernica, can you give us a bit more detail as to who writes these descriptions and how long had it been up on the website? And
we think it may have been up on the website for 2 to 3 years. I think the website was redone after the Capital Master Plan. It's obviously a horrendous mistake when you take into context the what actually happened in Guernica. We very much apologize for it. But it was a mistake, and but it was not one that was done with any maliciousness or any ulterior motive. It was just a mistake. And we've apologized.
And were you made aware of the mistake by the Spanish mission or by press?
We were made aware by our colleagues, Spanish language colleagues from the Department of Global Communication, who had seen press reports and some social media traffic. And we have been in touch with the Spanish mission and apologized to them as well.
I will come back to the question of who was informed, that the Secretary General was not informed. On June 26, the Secretary General sent a letter to President Anastasiadis that was put in the Cypriot press, replying to him about Varosha and saying that he's going to do according to the Security Council resolution. So, by whom the United Nations were not officially informed about plans to open Varosha?
I think I understand your question, but I think we're getting into UNESCO absurdism here. If we have not been informed, I cannot tell you who we've not been informed by. I'm trying my best Cartesian logic here. On that note, I will leave you with Lise Kingo and the Global Compact, and good afternoon.